From anonymity to being the center of an entire festival, let's have a look at ice barriers. Ice Barrier may well be to water what Rockets was to Dragon Link. There's a lot of really powerful cards that just came out in the latest pack for Ice Barriers, and it's helped in the creation of this sort of water pail idea that Konami seems to have been building towards in many different decks over the last while. I'm sure people have heard about Fiendsmith and how it's going to create a Fiend Pail deck, which we already have to some extent with the new Duel support. We already have sort of like Fire Pail, we have, you know, Dragon Pail, you know, there's all sorts of like these Pail decks, which are a bunch of different archetypes working together to achieve one common goal. Ice Barriers is slightly xenophobic, but they do enable much of what these Pail decks are aiming to do, except for the water attribute. So it is a bit of a new take, and hopefully this is just the beginning of what's going to be a continuous line of support for water attribute monsters, and we can maybe get a functional water Pail deck. As it stands, this deck is probably really good in Platinum and probably into the Diamond rank. I don't know if you're going to see a ton of success trying to claim to Master or in raiding duels with this. It does lose to many sort of common cards, but it is a phenomenal attempt at what they really want this deck to be, and it's a ton of fucking fun one way or the other. The deck is based around using their new boss monster, Lancia Ancestral Dragon of the Ice Mountain, to special summon out Ice Barrier monsters out to your field during your opponent's turn, or even if they were to special summon things during your turn. And the goal of that is utilizing its effect to set up several archetype-specific floodgates that are very, very powerful. While there is a range for you to choose from, a few of the most notable ones that we are playing are General Raiho of the Ice Barrier, which basically means that every time your opponent activates a monster effect, at resolution they have to discard a card or their effect is negated. Very powerful. This card is amazing. We have the Warlock of the Ice Barrier, which is essentially like anti-spell fragrance, where neither player can activate spell cards from hand and must set them first, and cannot activate spell cards on the turn on which they were set. So Warlock kind of acts like an anti-spell fragrance, which is also really good. This one, however, you do have to control another Ice Barrier for, so you're going to summon this one typically second. And the last one is Gorgeous, which is not only a floodgate, but also one of our most powerful extenders. This guy prevents your opponent from activating the effects of monsters in the graveyard. So the idea is you're going to be going through your combo to set up Lancia plus X amount of other interruptions, usually 1 or 2, and using those floodgate effects as well as the additional interruptions that you set up to completely just lock your opponent out of playing the game. Normally you're going to be aiming for Raiho and Gorgeous, or Raiho and Warlock, depending on your particular duel or flavor of opponent, but ultimately the goal is very much the same: stop them from making plays and interrupt the few plays that they are able to make. And luckily for this deck, their boss monster, the Lancia, is exceptionally easy to summon. It is a level 10 synchro monster that is mostly generic, it just needs a water attribute tuner. Now, not only do the new Ice Barriers have a ton of support, this guy being a level 6 tuner monster was huge because we already had Revealer of the Ice Barrier, which basically special summons out monsters from deck. It essentially means that this deck has a ton of one-card combos now, because of the new cards like Gorgeous. On top of that, we also have the Ice Jade support. We have Ice Jade, Ran Azurine, as well as Ice Jade Cradle to search for the Azurine. This card is basically Sword Soul Strategist long one. You discard another water card or Ice Jade card, like the spell card if you draw too many copies of it, and summon itself and summon a token. The token's level 3, this is the level 7 tuner, straight into Lancia. So this card's exceptionally easy to summon in this deck. You're really not going to have any difficulties there. And if you have something like Azurine, you can even summon it at a very low cost under the likes of Maxi. So there are pretty effective ways for you setting it up. That's probably one of your better plays under Maxi especially. But for your Ice Barrier combos, you're able to not only get Lancia, you're also to set up a number of other interruptions in the form of the Goatee cards or something like your Dragout. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show off a one-card combo. There are sort of, there's a couple of routes in which you can go for one-card combos in this deck. The most notable ones are Revealer of the Ice Barrier, which in my opinion is the best one. You also have Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier, which is technically also a one-card combo, and you also have Deep Sea Diva, which is a one-card combo that I was playing, and you might see it in some of the replays, but I ended up cutting it, and I'm not sure if it was just my good luck or not. I'm not sure if I was just getting lucky through, you know, the days in which I was playing, because I was playing this deck for days. But I always just had combo without Diva, right? I always just had it. I had Revealer, I had some, like, I always had a way of getting into my combo without ever needing Diva, and sometimes Diva just felt like an additional sort of dead normal summon in hand. It is, however, a one-card combo, and luckily the combo is basically identical to the regular Hexa combo, so we're going to go over the Revealer one, which covers off everything in our broad spectrum. We might have time for an additional combo or two later on, but I do want to show off some gameplay as well, without this video being 10 hours long, so we'll see where we're doing on that front. So we've got new combos, new boss monsters, new tools, and a splashable set of engines. If that's not a deck, then I don't know what is. So we're going to be hopping in, showing off the Revealer combo, as well as a couple of replays that are going to show some of the testing and the learning we did while playing it. So if you're interested in catching more videos just like this one, make sure you like and subscribe, and let me know down below if you have any suggestions for future videos, not only in terms of content, but also things you'd like to see in videos, certain styles, tips, hints, anything at all. Over the last while, I've been focusing more on making sure that I'm improving the quality of the content and learning about how to make better videos rather than just making more videos, right? So if anyone has any suggestions, hints, advice, whatever, I'm open. Discord is there. You can leave them in the comments, whatever suits you best. I'm not going to waste your time here. Let's get right into the combo. Alright, we're going to start off with a basic combo using just Revealer of the Ace Barrier here. So it's not going to be really all that complicated, and I know there's a few different orders and sequences in which people do things, but ultimately they all lead to the same sort of end board. I'm going to show you how I do it. We're going to start with Revealer then. So Revealer, we're going to discard a card. Of course, naturally, if you're playing in a duel, you're going to discard a Mirror Mage of the Ace Barrier for its effect. We're going to not do that because we're going to use that later in the combo, and I sort of want to show you without cheating it. So we're going to discard one of our random cards. Also, bear in mind how many hand traps we're playing. That's huge, and I'll get to that later. So we're going to discard a card. We're going to summon out the Hexa from our deck. So we're going to summon Hexa right here. We're going to activate Hexa's effect. We're going to send the Mirror Mage from the deck to the graveyard. So now we're going to use the Mirror Mage's effect. That's going to search our deck for Gorgias. Grab the Gorgias from deck to hand. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go for Gorgias, activating its effect. We're going to summon it out to the field right now. We're going to use its effect to bring back the Mirror Mage. I know a lot of people tend to do that later in their combo for whatever reason. I feel like doing it later in the combo makes you much more prone to certain hand traps, which is not ideal. Ultimately, though, the actual board and situation itself really doesn't matter or change that much. So we're just going to go with these two directly into Lancia. There we go. Now Mirror Mage is going to activate. We're going to tribute off our Hexa, and we're going to go into summoning 3 tokens here. So it'll summon out up to 3 tokens and increase its level by 1 for each token. So now we're going to go 5+1 into the Coral Dragon. There is also a version of this combo where you do the goatee cards. We'll get to that later. But we're going to start off with the Coral Dragon here. Summon it out. Now we're going to use the Coral Dragon on our 2 leftover cards. We're going to go into our Drag Out. I know a lot of people, for some reason, they work Anemone into that combo, and while you absolutely can do that, we'll skill +1 there, which is nice. While you can do it like that, it also sort of sacrifices your Anemone, which is a very good tool you can come back on later. So I'm not entirely sure why people do that. But honestly, this is pretty much it, right? And this seems like it's not very much, and we're against the bot here, so I don't think they're going to do enough for me to actually show off what it does. But Drag It gives you a spell trap negate, which is absolutely vital, because one of your biggest weaknesses in this deck is simply Imperm on Lancia. So if your opponent starts, yeah, they're not going to do anything. So the way this works then is, ideally during your opponent's turn, whenever your opponent summons a monster, you're going to activate Lancia's effect. You're going to summon out Raiho of the Ice Barrier, which is going to act as a floodgate for your opponent. And then whenever your opponent summons again, you're either going to summon out Gorgias or you're going to summon the Warlock, depending upon your opponent. So if you think your opponent needs to play a ton of spells or needs to play spells at all, then you summon out Warlock. If you think your opponent is going to be more reliant upon their graveyard than anything else, then you summon out Gorgias, who will also then get you Mirror Mage for more extension. So Gorgias is a play with more value in it, but again, if your opponent needs spell cards, Warlock is absolutely huge. All right, we're starting short and sweet with this one. We're going to go with our Revealer. We're going to use Medallion first to try and bait a potential Ash Blossom, grabbing us Gorgias from our deck. Revealer then going to activate, discarding the Mirror Mage, going to get hit with infinite impermanence. Luckily, not only does this deck have a really solid number of 1-card starters, it has an equally impressive number of extenders. Mirror Mage, as well as Gorgias and Speaker, are all invaluable extenders. So we're going to special summon out the the Speaker, special summon Gorgias. Gorgias then going to bring back our Mage as well. Now we're going to Synchro Summon into Lancia, the Ancestral Dragon of Ice Mountain. We're going to use the Mirror Mage, tributing off the Speaker. Speaker does have a graveyard effect we can use later on if needed, so it's a good one to have in grave. We're now going to go into the Coral Dragon here, a level 6 Tuner Synchro Monster. Then we're going to use these guys to go into Dragite. We use Coral Dragon just because when it's into the graveyard, we get to draw an extra card, and that's an Ash Blossom. So now we're going to set our Imperm. We've got our Ash, we've got double special summon off Lancia, and we have a Spell Trap Negate to stop a potential Imperm from our opponent on our Dragite. They are playing Pendulum, so they're going to grab the Supreme King Dragon Darkworm, summon a Darkworm, going to add the Supreme King Gate Magician to their hand. Our opponent actually plays this very smart. They decide they're going to try and set up as much as they possibly can in their hand before committing to any summons under the Lancia. So they're going to go for the Supreme King Gate Magician here, double by the way, one of which I negated and destroyed, but he just happened to have a second one, so fuck me, I guess. They're going to go Wings of Light, the quick play spell that will search their deck for another card. They're going to go Wisdom Magician as well, which is going to search them another, or sorry, more specifically play into the Pendulum Zone another card from their deck. They got that double Aris Magician on deck, popping the Gate. Popping itself to summon the Gate. Now they're going to Pendulum Summon out 3. Now what they've done is they've made a big mistake. So the way that this is going to resolve, our opponent no longer has any cards in hand, and that is very important because of General Raiho. General Raiho says you have to discard to negate it, to have your effect resolve. They don't have anything in hand, so they cannot resolve any monster effects on the field. We are going to respond to the summon of their Clearwing with an additional summon off of Lancia. It gets to use twice. We're going to go Gorgias from the graveyard. Raiho negating him again. Gorgias going to bring back the Mirror Mage with an extender for the following turn as well. Going to go for the double Aris Magician. This one we are going to Ash because it's not a monster effect on field. It will successfully resolve, and I really don't want to getting access to that amount of resources, so we are going to Ash that. I don't see him having another card we can Ash anytime soon, so we figure it's worth it. Drawing the another evenly. This is part of why I cut evenly from the list. We were running one Nibiru, so I try my luck, trying to fish for the nib to spin off a Dragite. We don't hit it, but our opponent very quickly decides that this ain't it. And they're not wrong. They were done. And that is the very sort of basic bare bones of Ace Barrier in a nutshell. You're just really aiming for a very simple board, Lancia plus as much protection as you're able to get it. That is your end board all of the time, because the Raiho and the Gorgias off of the next turn are going to be impressive and oppressive. So you've got the total, essentially kind of like skill drain. Unless they have a bajillion cards in hand, they're not going to be able to keep discarding effects of their Raiho. So they will have most of their monster effects negated. And Gorgias then as well, preventing them from using graveyard effects while also getting you additional extension for the following turn. It's simply incredible. It really is that good. Next game. Already getting into our second game, then you're going to see a couple of cards in this list that are odd. But again, we were learning and testing and everything, but the core sort of mechanics of the deck is still here. You'll see Pisces in our hand. They're going to go Maxi. We're going to negate that shit, of course. You can see Pisces in our hand. This was one of my earlier versions of the deck that were playing a much heavier goatee package. I've since learned that such isn't necessary, but you may get to see a little bit of it in this game. We're going to go for Revealer, pretty standard. We're going to drop the Pisces. We're going to summon out from the deck the Hexa, the actual one-card combo. We're going to send a Mirror Mage. Mirror Mage, they're going to activate, grabbing us Wayne. We were playing Wayne at this stage, but just grab Gorgias. We already had it in hand, so it didn't matter. We're now going to bring back our Mirror Mage to go in the Anemone. Anemone then is going to bring back the Mirror Mage from the graveyard one more time. We're going to Synchro Summon into the Lancia, the Ancestral Dragon. Now we're going to go for the Mirror Mage to tribute off the Anemone to summon out its 3 tokens. So there is 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to Synchro Summon into the Coral Dragon, just like before, and these guys into the Dragite. Very straightforward stuff. Coral Dragon going to draw us an extra card. We do draw in the shade, and again, that's part of why I didn't really like the Goatee engine. There was a lot of... It had a really high ceiling, but a lot of the cards weren't really that strong. They're going to go Gamma Seal over our Dragite. We're going to bring back the Gorgias then. Gorgias then going to bring back, of course, the Mirror Mage. Then it got Raigeki, which is going to completely rinse our board. That is the one thing about this deck. It doesn't have a ton of protection, but it does have a lot of recursion. We're going to try activating our cards into graveyard. They're going to go Called by the Grave onto our Lancia as well. They have every answer to everything that we're doing right now, so this is absolutely rough. But through needing to answer all of our negates and our interruptions, they now only have 2 cards left in hand. They're going to go for Tearlament's Grave. They're going to summon out the Tearlament Sheeran from their deck, then sending it to the graveyard to trigger its effective fusion. Someone going to shuffle back 2 from the grave to go into the Tearlament's Kikalos. Kikalos then going to search their deck for another card. We're going to negate that using Infinite Impermanence. That's going to stop the majority of their turn at this stage. So overextending to the point where they did in fact manage to successfully break our board, but they had to give up everything to do it. Going to banish the Grief, the summon the Tearlament's Cash there. They're going to mill free and hit nothing. Then they're going to swing for 4,600 points of damage. So very impressive turn from our opponent, but they weren't able to seal the deal through the imperm. Now we're going to draw into Ash Blossom, which is okay. We're going to go General Wayne here, special summoning itself. That's going to grab us the Medallion of the Ice Barrier. It's just kind of whatever. Medallion going to grab us Warlock. Warlock is basically just the card we're going to discard off Revealer because it's more useful in Grave than it is in deck. We're going to summon a Gorgias. Gorgias going to bring back the Mirror Mage before going into Trishula Zero, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, banishing all the monsters that he has on his field. And yeah, enabling lethal damage. So we're going to grab our Speaker for the Ice Barrier from our deck off of the Mirror Mage. Banish, banish. Special summoning out Speaker from our hand. We're going to go into another Lancia Ancestral Dragon. Now we don't have lethal, but we do have like 6,000 damage on board, which is going to put us in a very impressive range. And we still have Lancia to fall back on. Our opponent has a singular card in hand. They're going to normal summon Supreme Seamer, but they don't unfortunately have the ability to get any use out of it. They're going to grab Havness back from the graveyard, and I think they graciously accept their L here. So into the draw phase, straight to battle, straight to battle. There you go. A board getting absolutely decimated, but we were still able to come back and net ourselves a win. Pretty good overall. General Wayne is a card that it's good. It was very close to being really good if it didn't require your opponent to also control a monster. If you wanted to play Wayne, you absolutely can, which is why I wanted to have at least one replay where he was featured, because he's one of the Ice Barrier cards that are good, but like not good enough, in my opinion. If he was just like Gorgeous, where you need to control an Ice Barrier monster, that would be fine. If it was just that your opponent needed to control a monster, that would be fine. But the fact that it's both control an Ice Barrier and your opponent needs to control a monster makes him a little bit... he doesn't always feel the greatest in hand. So it's a card that I did opt to cut. But if you wanted to play him, he does enable some alternative lands into Trish Zero. Trish Zero is an awesome card, and you can definitely use it even in the version of the deck I'm playing now. But Wayne helps a lot when using Trish Zero. So I wanted to get it in at least once. Alright, getting into our third and final replay of the video. They're going to normal summon out Centurion through there. We're going to meet that with a Max C just to stop him from doing anything fancy. They're going to go Premier summoning itself. And this is one of the replays where we have Diva, and this is part of why I'm not a massive fan of Diva. You're going to see why in a moment. Stand up Centurion, then going to activate, discarding a card. They're going to play the MF into their back row, simply set to and pass. Not the most impactful Maxi in the world, but we do have evenly matched, which is very important. They're going to go through there, so I'm going to go straight to battle phase. They're going to summon out all their monsters. Stand up Centurion, then going to allow them to immediately synchro summon into the Centurion Auxilia. Auxilia then going to search their deck for a card. They know what's up. So we're going to go into the battle phase, and then in the battle phase, evenly matched, going to wipe out everything other than the Auxilia, which should be an easy dub as far as we're concerned, but we don't exactly have the greatest hand in the world. We're going to go into the Mirror Mage, summoning Georgia. We're going to summon out our free tokens. Going to go into the Coral Dragon next. I believe Mirror Mage going to search our deck for the Speaker, which is good. We're going to activate the Coral Dragon. We're going to discard Nib to pop the Auxilia. MF then is going to very quickly play the Auxilia into the back row to special summon itself out to the field in Auxilia's place. Now we're going to go Speaker of the Ice Barrier, summoning itself. We're going to go into our Lancia Ancestral Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Coral Dragon going to draw us an extra card. Azurine being an amazing draw, dropping the General Raiho to summon out itself in a token. Now we're also going to go into Ice Jade with Mirror Azurine. So that is pretty damn good. As you can see, Diva in hand. So, right, let me briefly talk about why we didn't just summon Diva. Yeah, that guy's fucking ass. So, Diva. The reason we didn't summon Diva is purely because our opponent had... Diva's weird, and the reason it's weird is because it's not an Ice Barrier name, and that's the big thing, right? So if, for example, you go to summon Diva and you get ashed, you get imperned, you get negated in some way, shape, or form, Diva is... Your turn is basically dead, right? So if I were to summon Revealer and I get imperned, okay. If I have Gorgeous in hand, if I have Speaker in hand, if I have any of those cards in hand, I can still play the game. If I summon Hexa and get negated, I can still play the game. If I summon Mirror Mage, I can play the game with my extenders. If I summon Diva and get negated, I can almost never keep playing the game. It's usually just turn over, which I really, really don't like. And that's the main reason I don't like it. It's a great card as a starter if it doesn't get negated, or if you have like a supremely powerful hand, by all means. But in most circumstances, because of what happens if it doesn't go through, that's why I don't really like it. But we can talk more about that at the deck portion towards the end. Typhon going to detach material, going to get rid of our Lancia, swinging into one of our tokens for an easy 2,900 points of damage, setting one and ending their turn. So not the most impactful turn from our opponent, but they did manage to get rid of our Lancia and prevent it from being useful. Now we're going to normal summon the Diva, and we get ashed. There you go. And now Diva it does nothing. It doesn't have a graveyard effect, it doesn't have anything else, it's just useless. So now we're going to use these two to go into the enemy. This was very risky, and I really debated on whether or not this was a good idea, but we decided it was. We're now going to go into the Adamantipator Ryzen Dragout. We're going to swing into Typhon, into the enemy. I figured Dragout was going to give me a much better chance going into the following turns, considering it's a spell trap negate rather than Azurine. Which is still a fantastic card, and Azurine can come back if our opponent banishes the card, so it was still ultimately worth it to me. We're going to activate in response to Primera to negate it. That should prevent him from summoning Primera for the rest of the turn, and in my mind, that's his only tuner, right? So they're going to go Synchro Rumble, though, and they just have the Rumble to bring it back, which is insane. Activating Primera, going to grab Stand Up Centurion here. Centurion player playing very well through everything that we're throwing at them. Going to discard a card, grabbing Trudea. Trudea going to summon itself by boosting up to level 8, synchro summoning into Legacia. Legacia able to pump our strongest monster while drawing a card. Centurion Bonds as well, going to activate, targeting the Primera, and I believe it places it in the spell trap card zone. So Primera is there for follow-up. Legacia getting rid of our Dragout, swinging into the enemy. And all the pressure is on the Diva here. It is all on the Diva. Going to play the Gargoyle from the back row, and we all know that this is not going to go very well from us. Drawing in the Warlock, again, not a fantastic draw. Diva going to activate. They're going to go for Gargoyle and Primera. Basically, a level 4 tuner and a level 8 non-tuner is the crux of the story here, summoning it out. There's 1 and 2. Diva then going to summon out a Hexa from our deck. Now, these two cards are going to activate. Primera is going to search. MF is going to play Gargoyle back into the back row, which is it's a novel idea. It's okay. I mean, Gargoyle would have added itself back to hand from graveyard anyway, so it's not a big deal. They are going to go into the Crimson Dragon, which has a fucking sick animation, by the way. Konami really did a good job on that one, and the Scarred Dragon Archfiend. I just wish their source files were nearly as tidy. So Crimson Dragon then going to activate, targeting, of course, the Legacia to summon at the Cosmic Blazar Dragon, which does give him an Omni Negate, which, given our poor board state, may be enough to shut us down. We're going to activate the Mirror Mage. They're going to immediately negate us, and I don't blame them. We don't exactly have a lot going on with this board right here. We're going to go into Typhon of our own. Typhon then going to activate detaching material to spin the Legacia. We're going to go into the battle phase, 29 and 200 to the face, against trying to wear down our opponent. Both players now have gone through a copy of Typhon, but the fact that Blazar comes back to the field means that ultimately it doesn't mean very much, because even just Blazar over our Deep Sea Diva is already lethal, but our opponent just needed to prove a point by going into Legacia, adding the Gargoyle back to their hand. Now they're going to activate the Gargoyle. They're going to send Auxilia to the grave to summon itself, just to stack as much damage as they can, taking out our monster before going 18 over the Gargoyle and then 4k directly. They just BM'd a little bit, but you know what? It is what it is, right? Good game from our opponent. We threw a lot at them. It was a very good showcase, not only of our cards, but also of our opponent, and how sort of like back and forth matchups like this can be. I think Centurion's pretty cool, and I think they played fantastically. I think they got a little lucky with that Rumble in hand, but you know what? It's a good card. They all play it. I can't be too mad. Ultimately, a very, very good game, both ways. Love to see it. All right, and here is my current list. I say current because I do change quite a bit. In fact, I think some ratios and stuff, it's not that they can be improved on, it's that it's game by game, right? The deck is very flexible. You can play it a ton of different ways. There are certain like sort of tech cards and engines you can increase, decrease, cut, add, whatever. So you will find yourself on a regular basis revisiting and adjusting your own deck list. I'm terrible for that at the best of times. But with a deck like this that's naturally so flexible, it's even worse, right? It suits me perfectly. So I'm going to go over my deck list, and then I'm going to sort of show you a couple of sort of tech options, and I'm going to take you through the core of the deck itself, just so that you can take it and you can build your own version of it, which is very important. Again, people need to be building their own decks, but I will show you absolutely what the core of what you have to play is, and then the reasoning behind some of my tech choices. So starting off with the most obvious tech choices are the hand traps, right? So we've got double effect Vealer and double imperm. So I usually go 2 for 2 because they serve very different purposes. I think imperm is overall a better card in most circumstances. But the advantage that Vealer has over imperm is that Vealer can be used, let's say you go first, right? And you control a whole bunch of cards, and then you're going, and then into your opponent's turn, if you activate Max E and you draw Vealer off of Max E, you can use it, right? Whereas if you draw Imperm off of Max E, if you already control cards, you can't use it. So that by itself gives a Vealer a very sort of big advantage in that regard, because Max E is such an important card that I really do think that Vealer is worth playing. So I do play them at 2 and 2, but that is entirely up to you. I've got double Duel. Duel's an awesome card. If you can fit it into your deck, you probably should. There's quite a few decks right now that, while even if a deck doesn't lose to Duel, trying to play through Duel with a lot of these modern decks really fucking sucks. So Duel is really good. Totally optional though. I know not a lot of people like Duel, and I know it's not always the most impactful in every single matchup, but I have found that it has been very, very useful. We've got triple Max E, obvious reasons. Triple Ash Blossom for obvious reasons because of Max E. Double Nib. Nib has been a fucking game winner. I'm tempted to play this shit at 3. Nib's an awesome card. If you're not playing Nib, fucking play it. Shit's awesome. Double Callby. Great card. You know, Max E is around. Crossout. Max E is around. Those are the hand traps. 17. 17. That's insane. That's a fucking lot of extra space. And that's not even all of the extra space. You can get more, right? 17 is just what I play. So getting into the actual core cards, I run triple Hexa. I'm between 1 to 3 on Hexa. I initially was running it at 1, but there's a couple of cool lands you can do with Hexa, and it maybe if you're somebody else, like I always just have Revealer in hand because I'm him, but if you're not him, then having additional starters in the form of Hexa and things that may be useful, so do bear that in mind. So triple Hexa between 1 to 3 is good. I play 1 Shift because I do like having the go-to line in my deck. I don't always use it, but when I do, I banish cards. The Mirror Mage, I run triple Mirror Mage. Not everyone runs triple. I think at least 2. Oh, wrong card. I think at least 2 is mandatory just because of how much it hinders your play if you're not able to send it from deck to grave off of the Hexa. So I think at least 2. I really like 3 because the amount of cards in your deck that discard as cost is really fucking good. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. So in this list by itself, there's 9. I normally play 12 because I normally play HJ Cradle, which is basically just additional copies of Azure. So I would normally run 12 cards that would have me discard. So having something that nets value out of grave when sent to grave is very useful. 1 Warlock. Warlock, you can play Warlock or Defender. I think Defender is another really good floodgate. I'm often switching between the two. So Warlock is basically like anti-spell fragrance, where neither player can activate spell cards, they have to set them, and then they can only use them until like their next turn. So it's like anti-spell fragrance on legs. But Defender is actually, I think it might be better. And the reason it might be better is because you need to think about impact overall. Warlock is probably your third choice when it comes to floodgates, because Gorgias is also a card, and Gorgias is fucking awesome, right? So you're already probably not going in the Warlock unless you're doing something matchup specific. So realistically, you probably don't have to play Warlock or Defender. But I really like Defender because what this basically does is that your opponent cannot declare an attack if their attack is greater than or equal to this card's defense. So they basically can't attack with anything with 1600 attack or higher, and the reason that's so important is to protect your actual good floodgates. General Raiho, protect your Gorgias, so they can't just normal summon something and swing over it before making their plays. So Defender does actually, I think, have more of a place than Warlock. But you don't have to play either of them, right? They're both totally optional because your 2 Lancia summons are probably going to be Raiho and Gorgias. So do bear that in mind. You don't have to play either of them, but I think Defender's really fucking good. Warlock is also pretty good, but I think Defender's better. Revealer. 3 copies of Revealer. It's your 1-card starter. You have to play it at 3. It's fucking amazing. We got Speaker at 1. It's a great extender. You could definitely play this at more than 1, actually, if you wanted to. If you're playing multiple copies of Hexa, originally, like I said, I was playing Hexa at 1, so Speaker at 1 made sense. If you're playing extra copies of Hexa, there is definitely an argument to be made to play more copies of Speaker, because it will get you more consistent access to certain synchro lanes. So that's not terrible. You could definitely play more Speaker if you want, but one minimum I think is good. It enables some really key lanes, and honestly, it's just a good card. It's hard to go wrong with it. General Raiho is your boss monster, essentially. 2100 attack, 2300 defense, and level 6. When your opponent activates a monster effect at resolution, they are offered a choice. They can discard a card, and if they don't, their monster's effect is negated. If they don't have a card to discard, their monster's effect is negated. So it really puts a limit on the number of effects your opponent can use, and really forces them to think about and play around this card. At 2300 defense, he's not the smallest card in the world, but it's not super difficult for your opponent to summon a monster capable of getting over him, meaning things, again, coming back to Defender, are pretty important in keeping him safe. Gorgias is another one of our, not only an extender, but a floodgate. Like, this guy, Gorgias, Georgius, whatever the fuck you want to call him, George. This is the guy who basically ties the whole deck together. Being a level 6 extender that special summons itself from hand and revives a monster back from grave is fucking broken. And the fact that while he's on the field and you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot activate monster effects in graveyard. That paired with Raiho's ability to stop them from using them on field really slows your opponent down. And in a lot of cases, they just can't get over your board, man, especially considering they probably have to get past a Dragite, or they're facing down an Ascan Banish, or they're looking at a Lancia, which can potentially loop into a Trishula. So there's it's a lot to deal with, especially when they're put on such a tight leash. So that is definitely worth noting. Eschian Ran Azurine is one of the single best cards in your deck. This card is phenomenal. It's basically just Sword Soul Strategist long one. You discard a water monster or an Eschian card to special summon itself and a level 3 token. This guy's a level 7 tuners. 3+7 gives you 10. That's immediate access to a Lancia or an Eschian Gwymir Azurine, maybe even your Ching Ying. I don't use Ching Ying a bunch, but like I've noticed in recent games especially how useful he is when he's relevant. So I do really like this guy. So Azurine's one of the best cards in your deck. If you really wanted to make it more consistent, I would play triple Ice Jade Cradle, which basically just searches for Azurine. And because it's an Ice Jade card, it's not like it's going to clog up your hand, because you just discard, like if you open 2, you just use 1 and discard the other one as cost for Azurine. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. You could definitely play Cradle. I typically do. Right now in this build I'm not, but I'm always back. It's one of the changes I'm constantly making, going back and forth on Cradle. An argument is definitely there to be made. Triple Medallion of the Ice Barrier. If you're not playing this with 3, you might have brain damage. Consult a doctor. And 1 copy of the Ice Barrier Trap card, which I have not really been playing for very long, but it was put onto it by a member of our Discord. Big shout out to Tobes. But this card is pretty good. It's searchable off the Mirror Mage, it's decent battlefield protection if you happen to hard draw it, but its primary benefit comes into play whenever it's discarded or sent to the graveyard through other means. Basically, you get to send a level 5 or higher water monster from deck to grave, and then add a water monster from graveyard to hand. Now, it can add any water monster from grave to hand, so don't necessarily just tie it to level 5 or higher. You'll have to send a level 5 or higher to grave, like Raiho, which can be summoned from grave off Lancia anyway, so it being in grave doesn't matter. Gorgias, which can be used as an extender from grave if it's there and you have something else that can bring it back. Azurine, if you've already used it, it's just a level 5 or higher, so you've got plenty already to use. But you can, once you've sent a card as cost, you can add any water monster from grave back to hand. So if you've got like a Revealer or something in grave you want to add back, have at it. So it is pretty good. I do like this card. I'm going to continue testing with it. I might cut it, I might bump it up, it might stay perfectly where it is, who knows. I'm going to keep playing with it and see what happens. One thing that is worth noting, if you're going to be playing Ice Barrier, there is always an argument to be made, especially now more than ever, to play Gameciel. Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju, being a level 5 or higher water monster, can be sent to graveyard off of Ice Barrier as cost, and then added back to your hand off of its own effect, which gives you an out to certain cards that you just literally don't have an out for, i.e. Raid Raptors. Specifically Raid Raptors. So if you're worried about raid raptors, if you're seeing a lot of raptors and you don't really know how to deal with it and you really want to have a built-in counter to it, this is going to be the way. Another really good counter to raid raptors is Ching Ying. Ching Ying can resist the initial board wipe from raid raptors if you're able to get this far, while also increasing his own attack and decreasing their attack. I don't think he decreases the attack of the raid raptors, but if you can banish enough cards, you may be able to increase his attack points to the point where he's able to get over some of them. 5,300 is a big target though, so I don't know. It'd be tough. He's good. He's pretty good at outing the Ultimate Falcon. Like, getting over 35 isn't the hardest thing in the world. The Rising Rebellion Falcon is a fucking tough send. The only real circumstance under which you're going to get over that is if they activate its effect and detach the Brave Strix that it would have had as material, because it gets its additional 1,300 attack points from the Brave Strix. So if they detach that as material to activate an effect of a Synchro monster of an Exceed monster from their graveyard, Ching Ying could potentially get over 4k. Not super easily, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to do. So there is definitely room for plays to happen there. Do with that information what you will, but long story short, you can play you can play Gamma Seal if you're worried about raid raptors. If you're not worried about raid raptors, and if you're happy enough just saying that I lost that matchup and moving on, then maybe you don't need Gamma Seal, but that is up to you. Getting into the extra deck is not very tight. There's a lot of flexibility here. In terms of the cards you have to play, I would say Coral Dragon and Dragite are must-plays. At least one Trishula is a must-play. Crocodragon is a must-play. Ching Ying is as close to a must-play as you can get without technically being one, so I think you should play Ching Ying. Unless it would absolutely, like, fucking, I don't know, ruin your day if you were playing it. I don't know, fucking break your account balance. Yeah, this guy's really fucking good. You should play him, but you don't have to. So at least one, one Coral Dragon, one Dragite, at least one Trish, one Crocodragon, one Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Ching Ying, one Gwamir Azurine, at least one Lancia, and one Marincess Coral Anemone. Those are the cards you have to play. Over the cards that we're choosing to play, we have the Goatee engine. So we've got the Ariampos, we've got the Ascan, and we've got Goatee of the Deep Beyond. It's in there as a lane that you can do. I do not use it very often though, and I can definitely see an argument for which someone would want to cut it, because it does take up quite a few spaces in the extra deck, and the Garnet in the main deck is also not very fun. So there's an argument to be made to cut them all together, and to be honest, the more I play it, the more I'm aligning with that way of thinking. Because there are some cards in the extra deck I would like to include that I simply don't have space for because of the Goatee cards. So you can play them, you can cut them, it's up to you. I was playing them, but I will likely experiment with decks that don't play them in the future. White Aura Wheel is a phenomenal card. You don't have to play it, but it is fucking awesome. If you Synchro Summon it, just wipe your opponent's board. It can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during the battle phase. It does piercing damage. It's just really good, man. It's just a great card. I play Double Trish. I think Double Trish is really good because you can summon Trish just naturally, but you do always want to have a copy of it to go into if they do deal with your Lancia. So I think having the ability to have one in your extra deck for Lancia while also being able to consciously Synchro Summon into one is very important. So I ended up playing 2 copies, and I don't regret it. Crocodragon is awesome. Goatee of Deep Beyond we already talked about. Yeah, Trishula Zero is the next one on our chopping block, and this card is another card that's really good. It gets better if you're playing certain extenders. So in my version of the list, trying to summon this card is actually quite difficult. And doable, don't get me wrong, doable, but difficult. If you want to make it easier, one card, one addition to your deck makes this so much easier to summon, and that is Wayne. This guy, General Wayne of the Ice Barrier, makes this card so much easier to summon. Wayne isn't a terrible card. You can definitely play this. I talked about this in the second replay. If you wanted to make Trish Zero easier to summon on a more consistent basis, General Wayne is the way to go. It can also search your deck for a Ice Barrier card on summon. Ice Barrier Spell or Trap specifically, which is basically a monster. I can technically also grab Ice Barrier, which is neat. So there's a few things that Wayne can do that might actually be worth investigating, and I will likely revisit builds that use him. He did make summoning Trish Zero very easy, and I do miss being able to summon this card as easily as I was during my initial playtesting. That is one lamentable thing. He was a little bit inconsistent in hand, but to be perfectly honest, since then I have made quite a number of changes to the list. I cut a lot of the Goatee cards. I might continue to cut Goatee cards. So maybe in the absence of the Goatee cards, General Wayne might have a chance to shine. Yet to be seen. If you want to see if we end up using it in another video, subscribe and you'll see it as it comes. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me cut the deck down to bare bones, just the absolute bare minimum of what you have to play. Bang, bang. You know what? I'm actually gonna cut these guys as well, because again, I'm really not super sold on them. And this is it. This is what you have to play if you want to play this deck competently, right? Everything after this point is entirely up to you. Just extenders, additional engine pieces, additional packages, whatever you want, right? But this is what you have to play. Let me just bring up the full deck list again. But this is the full list. So you can compare the two if you want. This is what I ended up playing. Make any changes, any suggestions, any cool tech options, any engines that I'm potentially missing or forgetting, let me know down below, or you can hop into the Discord to share your ideas there. If you want to catch more videos just like this as they come out, please do subscribe and like the video. It does help me out, and like I said, I'm working on a lot of things to try and make production of videos better and quicker. But it is a vast learning curve of trying to get into the higher levels of content production. So again, I appreciate everyone's patience. I know I haven't been uploading nearly as often as I used to, but I appreciate the support if you want to help your boy out. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.